The baby is clearly tired. They're rubbing their eyes, yawning, fussy, arching away from everything, and yet somehow bedtime turns into a full-scale battle. They cry when you try to settle them, fight sleep with everything they've got, need endless rocking, feeding or bouncing, or seem completely wired despite being exhausted. And this is the point where many parents get told the same thing: they're overtired. Now, sometimes fatigue is part of the picture, but I think the sleep world has massively oversimplified what's actually happening here, because two very different things can look almost identical at the same time. A child who isn't tired enough and a child who is deeply dysregulated, and they need completely different responses. Hi, I'm Lyndsey, paediatric nurse, IBCLC, and co-founder of the Holistic Sleep Coaching Programme, where we train practitioners around the world to support infant and child sleep through a biology, development, regulation and relationship lens rather than rigid behavioural formulas. One of the biggest mistakes I see in sleep support is people jumping to strategy before properly understanding what state the child is actually in. So today we're going to unpack why some babies fight sleep, why bedtime can feel impossible, and why the answer is often much more nuanced than people realise. This is probably the single most important thing to understand about falling asleep. Sleep happens most easily in a calm and safe state, not when someone is stressed, cranky or wound up. A child can be genuinely tired and still unable to fall asleep easily if they're dysregulated. And dysregulation can happen for all sorts of reasons: overstimulation, big emotions, transitions, separation, illness, developmental changes, sensory overwhelm, frustration, environmental stress, or simply being very sensitive temperamentally. This is why bedtime struggles are often misunderstood. People see a tired child resisting sleep and assume the child must somehow be too tired to sleep. But physiologically, exhaustion itself does not prevent sleep. Dysregulation does. Now, before you come for me, let me clarify something. Fatigue absolutely affects behaviour. A tired child may become more emotional, more sensitive, more reactive, less flexible, and harder to soothe. But that's very different from saying being overtired stops sleep. What's usually happening is this: the child has become dysregulated because they're fatigued, and once the stress response is activated, sleep becomes harder. That distinction matters because it changes the intervention completely. If we assume the issue is simply more tiredness, we often end up aggressively protecting naps, pushing very early bedtimes, or becoming anxious about wake windows. But if the real issue is nervous system activation, then what the child actually needs is support regulating, not necessarily more sleep. Now, here's the other side of this. Sometimes the child genuinely is not tired enough to sleep yet. And this is where things get confusing because the behaviours can overlap. Children who aren't tired but bored may also fuss, resist bedtime, need lots of support, pop awake repeatedly, or seem restless and wired. This is why assessment matters so much. As children grow, sleep needs gradually reduce. So a schedule that worked beautifully 3 months ago may suddenly stop working. Parents often panic at this point and double down on trying harder, more settling, earlier bedtime, longer naps, when sometimes the child simply needs less daytime sleep, a later bedtime, or more wakefulness before sleep pressure builds sufficiently. This is why generic sleep advice often falls apart in real life, because the exact same behaviour can come from two different underlying causes. Temperament also changes the bedtime picture massively. Some babies transition into sleep very easily, others don't. Highly alert, sensitive, observant or reactive children often need much more support winding down. They notice everything, process everything, react strongly to stimulation, and often find transitions harder. That means bedtime isn't simply about enough tiredness, it's about helping the nervous system shift state. And this is where many mainstream sleep approaches feel deeply mismatched for certain children, because they assume all babies can transition into sleep similarly if the routine is correct. But nervous systems vary enormously. Another layer people miss is connection. For many children, bedtime is the first moment in the day when everything slows down. No distractions, no movement, no stimulation, and suddenly all the need for reassurance, closeness and co-regulation bubbles to the surface. That's why some children become intensely clingy at bedtime, even after seemingly coping well all day. They're not manipulating, they're reconnecting. And for children who are deeply attachment-oriented or highly sensitive, bedtime may genuinely require more proximity and support. That's not failure. It's information about the child in front of you. So the answer depends entirely on why the child is struggling to fall asleep. If regulation is the issue, helpful approaches may include reducing stimulation before bed, more physical play earlier in the day, slowing the pace in the evening, connection-focused bedtime routines, movement, touch, predictability, calmer transitions, supporting sensory needs. If undertiredness is the issue, it may help to review total sleep across 24 hours, nap timing, wakefulness before bed, whether sleep needs have shifted developmentally. And sometimes it's both. A child may be slightly undertired and dysregulated. This is why sleep support should never be purely formulaic. So if your baby won't fall asleep easily, it doesn't automatically mean they're broken, you have bad habits, or you've missed some magical sleep trick. Usually there's a reason, and most of the time the reason sits somewhere within biology, sleep pressure, regulation, temperament, connection or development. Once you understand those layers, bedtime starts making much more sense. If this approach resonates with you, you'll find more videos on the channel where we unpack sleep through the lens of biology, development and relationship rather than rigid sleep rules. And if you want to understand this more deeply as a practitioner, you might find our earlier videos helpful. Check out this one, which dives deep into the science of sleep.